Welcome back to the Art of Hobbiness. I'm Erin, joined by my lovely co-host Tam.
Hi!
And we have a wonderful guest joining us today, Ash, all the way from the UK. Really excited to have you here today, Ash. And she reached out to us on social media, and she has a lot of great energy. We're super excited to have you. We'd love to just hear a little bit about what you're into as far as your hobbies, and maybe a little bit of background about yourself too.
Cool. So my hobbies are wide and far-reaching, but concentrate really on textiles and particularly knitting, but going down historic rabbit holes for times where knitting and women's work and women's hobbies have been massively overlooked and have just been gone, that's just a woman with a hobby. We don't need to worry about that. But then it turns out we've done all things like smuggle state secrets and bring down whole organizations just through essentially women's hobbies and just doing little things around the house. And I think the hobby actually really is just aggressive feminist history. But that sounds a lot less exciting when you try to give that to someone.
I think it's a really interesting take on it. And honestly, like when you kind of brought that to my attention, I had never really considered how far that rabbit hole goes. And when I started kind of looking into this, preparing for this episode, it makes a lot of sense. And I think I found in some of your stuff, you called it like a soft rebellion. And I don't know if you want to tell us maybe some examples, like more specific examples of what that would look like in history, or what that did look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So there were obviously times previously where women could not be out and about working jobs outside of the home. We were strictly kept in the domestic sphere. Your job was be a good wife, be quiet, and don't have any thoughts. And a tiny rebellion against that system was women taking on like piecework of knitting and sewing and other little crafty jobs. And because they were only making a little bit of money at a time, it didn't have to be declared anywhere. So it could just be tucked away and tucked away. So eventually, when your husband went mysteriously missing, or should that unfortunately not happen, you had a little pile of cash where you could just fix your life. And it's that rebellion against the concepts of like the angel of the house, which was a strong Victorian concept, was about how you could show that you were a good mother and you were a good wife and you were a good woman by producing good needlework. In normally through embroidery, but that would be it. And you could change your entire social standing just by the quality of putting together good knitting.
And knitting was seen as a hobby at that point in time, right? Or was it more seen as part of the profession of being a family woman in the home?
This is the thing. So it used to be a big part of a woman's role within the home, but you were encouraged to knit almost as a hobby as well as a necessity.
Okay.
Because if you didn't knit a jumper fast enough, your children would not make it through the winter. But then as we industrialized and knitting guilds came into things and the men decided to take over, what happened then was it kind of got devalued into a hobby, but then also used to pressure you into that role of good wife. So it changed from a like working class necessity to something that upper class women would do to show that they had the time for hobbies and they had the time to just sit, and they didn't need to be knitting for their children because they had someone else to do it for them and they could afford to pay someone. And so that is where knitting being seen as like a luxury and a hobby comes in. But then it was weaponized to keep women at home and busy, because otherwise they'd do things like have thoughts and demand votes and stuff. And there's this whole line of essentially knitting as a hobby going from hobby to profession, and both answers are wrong at any given time. And right now we're kind of we're halfway through that kind of switch again, where it's gone from grandma hobby with no respect that only old women do that knit baby boots for family, kind of swinging back the other way. Now you can be a professional knitter again, and you can do hobbies at a more not respected level, but with that kind of societal implication that, you know, you're an artist now, you're a maker, you're a creator, you're not just a woman with grandma hobbies.
It's so interesting because before you even pointed it out, I noticed that you said that knitting was devalued as a hobby, like almost negatively putting it there. But then you pointed out how then it swung to like a privilege by having somebody who could do that for you. And you then later expressed how there seems to be like this constant swing where hobbies go from seen as a waste of time to a priority, which I think, you know, if we fast forward in time to the millennial mom, which is what our podcast is typically geared toward, I think we can say that we even see that swing in our generation. You know, we talk about how hobbies were seemed as useless unless it could provide something amazing for you on your resume to help you continue to grow professionally, right? But now we're trying to take that back and treat it as more like a luxury, and that the luxury is ours, like our own time. So there seems to be a trend in history, which makes me wonder, have you, in your time of studying this, have you seen any, what's the word I'm looking for? Like skills that those women learned on how to take back that self-care and hobby time that we as millennial mom could see and use in our current generation to help us?
So time was very much like all hobbies, and even when knitting and textiles, so things like spinning as well, before they could be enjoyed as hobbies, had to be planned in such a way that they could just be picked up and put down. And that was kind of the rebellion in itself there, was that instead of trying to carve out an entire hour with no babies crying, no children saying your name 4,000 times, none of that could be planned in, but 10 minutes of spinning here could happen, and 10-15 minutes while the washing's on, some more rows on the knitting could be done. And it's taking those almost micro rebellions against it all and saying, no, this time is mine. I'm taking it whether you like it or not, but I will compromise on the fact that my 60-minute break doesn't need to be in one 60-minute chunk. So lots of things were made to be, like lots of techniques were developed to be really portable. So you could just pick them up, put them down when something else needed your attention, and then just come back to them with very little hazard for it to be lost or damaged and stuff. And if you talk to quite a lot of knitters, you find that is still the case, in that there'll always be a micro project in a handbag, and it'll almost always be a pair of socks, because they are the easiest to remember what you're doing, remember where you are, and pick up again when you've put them down for 6 months.
I mean, that makes sense. Like, I think that's great advice for, I think we speak to that about micro moments of time, like not trying to, it can be overwhelming to dedicate a whole afternoon or even an hour to your hobby time. And if you have kids running around, finding those small moments to give yourself a little bit of self-care, whatever that may be, that's really great advice, a great way to look at it, you know, that it's not just black and white, that fitting in those little moments of joy can really change your day. So yeah, I think that translates across the generations, right?
Well, what I find so interesting is, you know, like I feel as a millennial mom, I live and die by my Apple Calendar or my Google Calendar to actually schedule even those 10-minute times, right? Like I don't, while those 10-minute, you know, sections exist, I still have to schedule them for me. And I'm trying to put myself in, you know, that time in history before iPhones existed, and even like, you know, those little Shutterfly calendars we used to get. Like, how did those women find that time and carve that time for themselves? I find that interesting. Have you found anything in that? Was it truly just that carrying it with them was how they made that time, or was there settings in which they could escape to that allowed that time?
So it was kind of the conscious choice to always have what you were working on nearby. So if you found yourself with a spare 3 minutes, you could do a little bit of what you loved and do that restorative action. But in the case of knitting, knitting circles were popular pretty much in some format throughout history. As long as there has been knitting, there have been women getting together on purpose, to the point where there were times in, I want to say the Second World War predominantly, but it crops up quite a few times, of knitting circles being banned because women were going, yeah, I'm just gonna go see everyone down the road and go knitting, but actually we're organising suffragette rallies and getting themselves arrested and all sorts of things under the guise of, oh no, don't worry about it, I'm just going knitting, it's fine. So it was a proper balance between intentionally carving out the time and building community around the time, because then you can not quite wedge it into your calendar that way, but kind of all support each other with it, or keeping projects close so you know that, oh, I've got 5 minutes between phone calls or whatever it is you need to do. You can just pick it up and quickly, sneakily do a little bit. But I've got a 7-year-old little boy, and he's adorable, bless him. As soon as he sees knitting needles in my hands, he's like, oh, now's not the time.
Nice.
So I think that's always a blessing that I have there.
Definitely. Well, it's nice you can just do it and show that example for your child too. Like, hey, this is mom's hobby time, I love that. One thing I was thinking about with knitting, well, one, I have started seeing, and I don't know if it's just because we're in the hobby world now, but so many people, it seems like there's a resurgence of knitting. And I don't know if you think that's to be true, but so many people comment on that's their hobby. I've now friends personally that are doing a lot of knitting. And I almost wondered if it's a current rebellion against just the fast pacedness of our lives and like a way to slow things down. I don't know if you thought about that in more current, in the current state of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So a thing that I talk about on Threads quite a lot is the notion of rebellions not having to be massive, and they can, like, one, sit down with a cup of tea and your hobby can be a rebellion against the speedy culture of social media. It can be a rebellion against consumerism if you sit down and fix those socks that you've had for 10 years. Yeah. It can be a rebellion against your thoughts of how you should feel. It can help you process emotions instead of just carry on and keep, meeting the standards you've set. It's a rebellion against your perception of self, that you might actually be wearing 17 different hats and fulfilling 17 different job roles, but at the end of the day, it's you and your knitting, and that is rebellion enough.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Yeah, consumerism too. That's a really good one. I guess I thought about that, but not like in that term of it being a resistance and like actually fixing things that are broken, right? Versus going out and buying new things. That's another really good one, powerful one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think it's amazing that like you talk about that, because like when we talk about, monetizing hobbies in this realm, and the, whether it's, to proceed with caution or to avoid in order to hold in your self-care time. Throughout history, I would assume that there was a monetization of hobbies, correct?
Yes, because there kind of had to be. Because the expectation was that you were, especially as a woman, looking after your family. That was your one job. So to do anything else that didn't then provide an income or an asset of some variety was like the worst thing you could be doing. To the point where women would take on like contract work where they would be given a weighed amount of resources and like threads and fabrics and things, and then they would be paid on the weight of the waste that was returned to them, to the employer, to make sure that that woman had not used any of those resources for herself at all. That she had been given a pile of perfect things for the project and she was not allowed to have taken any. And if it came back even slightly less than expected, they would either take it out of her wages or make her give it back.
Wow.
That was the kind of, like, you were not allowed to do anything for your own pleasure, your own happiness, your own hobbies, and especially not if it came at a cost to someone else, especially in that way. And a lot of households wouldn't have had the resources financially to be able to go, well, I see that you like knitting for the children. Why don't you knit yourself something? Because as a mother, you were bottom of the line there. Everyone else was getting socks for winter, and you were just hoping there was enough left at the end.
So we've been we're fighting against like hundreds of years, if not thousands of years.
Exactly.
About how you have to show your worth as a woman, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've got an uphill battle, team.
Well, and Erin, like, we talk about, like, in one of our recent episodes about like the generations and like learning from each other and like passing down like this, we'll say rebellion because of the conversation we're having of making sure that hobbies and self-care are our time, right? Yeah. So it's, I admit that I think sometimes I get closed-minded in thinking that it's just me and my generation that's in this battle, and it's us against everything else. And it's clearly not the case. Like our mothers, our grandmothers had this same challenge, and maybe I should try more to speak to those generations above me to kind of get more knowledge of, the trial and error, and speak to somebody who's kind of gone through it, but then also speak more down to my daughter of like, the things that I am challenged with my self-care and my hobbies to, give her some tools without even really trying, but just like pushing them, and I don't want to say pushing because that sounds aggressive, but like putting it out there that
example.
Example that this is we can unite as women across generations to hold this as a very sacred time and a very sacred space, because not only is it help us personally, but it seems like it also would help us in a much larger story of women's history, not just like it's just so easy to get closed-minded and think just about yourself and just about your smaller circle. But like looking at what women in the past have done to create and to fight for that self-care time, and then see where I am. And it's thought-provoking.
Definitely. No, that's well said. I agree, Tam. Yeah.
I think for me, one of my favorite things, like historically in that vein, is, have you heard of Phyllis Doyle? She was a spy in the Second World War that essentially smuggled some of the most important secrets from Berlin, because she used to hide her secrets that she had found. She used to chat up Nazi officers and just be their friend, learn a load of things, code it into her knitting, so when she got back, she could send it over radio.
Oh my
through
gosh.
a cipher, but they never suspected her because she was just a woman and she was just knitting.
She was just knitting.
That's incredible.
Yeah, there's records of her being like fully strip searched, but because she's knitted the code, like she's put the codes inside ribbons with knitting needles and they're tying her hair up, there's accounts of her being fully strip searched. The Nazis not checking her hair.
Right.
And the secrets are right there in front of them. But because they've just gone, it's a woman knitting, it's fine, don't worry about it. And like 80% of the men that were sent to do the same task using like conventional spy methods, I think is the right term there, couldn't do it. They'd get caught within 48 hours and then hoiked back over to England. So the fact that they sent a woman over with her knitting to just go, off you pop, and she was one of the most successful British spies.
That's incredible.
That is a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing because I know that knitting is kind of like the hobby that we keep going back to, but it's incredible how something so seemingly innocent has such a large part of women's history and just history in general. Like it continuously becomes more and more apparent to me how hobby time is really influential.
Yeah, it really is.
Really influential.
And how vital it is to
Absolutely. And so I think, we speak back to the millennial mom and she's trying to reason with herself about finding time for self-care and finding time for hobbies. Try to put yourself even just in, I don't know, do some character acting, maybe you're just doing this because it's going to change the course of the history of your family, and like where they go someday. And you never know, you might influence your kid's kid and by just doing something as simple as knitting, So I find that fascinating. Ash, if you were to put into terms what a millennial mom could do to really prioritize self-care as a form of survival and resistance based off of the history that you've learned of women using hobbies as survival and resistance. What do you think that they could do to use that information to kind of spark the priority of putting self-care and hobbies in their everyday life?
I think that the thing I would suggest most would be form some form of community around your self-care and especially your hobbies. Create some sort of ritual element to it. Give it the reverence it deserves in a weird way, because it comes from, as you say, this long, intricate history of women's rights, women's progress, our state of the world, general wider state of the world. Treat it with that respect and give it the 10 minutes. But also let other people come on that journey with you, because the connections personally that you can make through your hobbies and through especially things like textiles is knitters don't shut up ever, and it is the most heartwarming, affirmative space that I have ever been part of. And knowing that even just putting 30 minutes into an online craft group a week sometimes can very much be the make or break. And you deserve as much prioritization as the craft does, as the hobby does, as the history does.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I agree
Beautiful.
with you. I feel like just looking at my own home, when I feel like I had the husband and the kids that wanted me to have the self-care time, but I was afraid to have that self-care time personally. So I think I was the missing piece of the puzzle of that community, and putting that reference in that you suggested that made that, that sparked that to keep going and to utilize that. So I totally agree with you. I think it's building that community that shares that importance of making that a priority. Because I think until I got there and felt that, I just feel like I was missing that piece. I feel like I just didn't have that there.
And I feel like that's 100% why we're here, right? That's why we're doing the Art of Hobbiness, is for this community, because it just like this motivation to keep going and to prioritize our self-care. So we, that was really a great piece of advice, Ash. Thank you for sharing.
That's all right.
We would love to know what else you're up to. If you want to share anything with the audience that you might want to promote, or just where to find you online.
Yeah, so I'm currently just finishing up and sending to the publishers my first book, which is tentatively called The Secret History of Knitting. And it explores the history of knitting, but through a historic analysis of Tom Daley, the Olympic diver and public male knitter, and explores the genders, the politics, the economic history, the technical history of knitting, but through a contemporary lens.
Wow.
And you can find me mostly on Threads and Instagram at Ashleigh-Ellan.
I love it.
Love that. No, that book sounds really exciting.
Actually, I'm very interested in that. In fact, it's making me be like, wait. Now I want to talk about the gender differences in knitting. And what does that look like in history? Can you tell us without giving your book away? Or like, is that a whole nother episode?
I mean,
how about we do that after you publish your book?
Yeah, I'll come back afterwards.
Okay, deal.
Yeah, definitely let us know. I look forward to reading that once it's published. That sounds really interesting.
Oh my goodness. Well, Ashleigh, thank you so much for being on our show with us today. You were incredibly interesting, very thought-provoking. Like I said, I was so excited to have you on the show because I really loved like the historian in you, and I really wanted our audience to be able to hear a little bit of how, it's again, that it's not just the millennials that are, that have taken on this battle. We're just the newest generation to take on this battle, and how we can, keep the charge going from our ancestors, to keep showing that women deserve that time and how valuable that time can be and influential it can be. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
All right, bye, Ash.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi guys, it's Tam. Okay, before we wrap up, there was a little moment from our chat with Ashleigh-Ellan that we just couldn't leave on the cutting room floor. Technically, this part wasn't supposed to make the episode, but once we listened back, we knew we had to share it. It's one of those behind the scenes moments, that perfectly captures why we love these creative conversations. Here you go.
All right, we'll end it there.
That's kind of the end. Yeah. Ash, I just find you very interesting.
Yeah,
I thought
definitely.
that was really I feel like I'm going to be thinking on this one for a while about that history piece.
Yeah.
And I know I would mention to Erin that I really wanted to see if we could find more folks that could kind of speak to that generational battle, because I really think it's there.
Yeah.
So I can't thank you enough for being on our show.
Yeah, for sure.
No worries. I will prattle on about knitting history specifically forever, because there are so many overlooked cool stories.
Yeah.
And another one of my favorite ones is that women in concentration camps that were forced to knit Nazi officers' socks would intentionally knit them wrong. They'd knit them a little bit too tight so the officers would get blisters, so couldn't make it as far as the front lines, or they'd knit one cuff slightly looser than the other one, so the officer would have to spend his whole day pulling his socks up.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm I love that.
Yeah.
That's such a great example of, there's not much I can do about this war, but by God, am I going to do what I can about it? And it's making this man's feet hurt.
And there's nothing more annoying than a sock that just won't.
Oh my gosh. Where do you get
it drives me insane.
where do you get your stories? Are you just searching online for all these stories? Are there books that you read? I mean, is there just a bunch of resources out there for this kind of topic already, or?
There's not a massive amount of anything, really. It's a lot of piecing stories together, because with it being women's history, no one's really writing it down.
Right.
And also, if you wanted to know how to knit a specific thing, you would just go and ask your neighbors. You would ask your community. Or if something was happening, you'd just talk to people around you, because that's what women do.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of forced them.
Yeah, it didn't have to be a full fanfare and we write an entire thing about it. We'd just take a box of biscuits down to the other end of the village and go, can you show me how to do this? So there's quite a lot of piecing it together. But when you find a solid account of something, it's so exciting.
Yeah, I bet.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you talk about, by the way, I'm planning to use all of this in our podcast
just clip it back in.
I'm going to plug it right back in. But I find it so interesting that you talk about how it was just simply walking down the street to go talk to your neighbor. Whereas now, I'll be honest with you, I'm afraid to walk next door and ask my neighbor for anything, because I've just got that social anxiety, but also there's just,
you don't want to bother them, or you feel like
don't
it's intrusive or something. Yeah,
absolutely. And so to think that, right now, if I wanted to figure out something, I would just try to Google it. But you're even saying that there's not much out there. It's man, what a challenge it is for women to share our stories.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that was the hardest while I was trying to research medieval knitting guilds, because one of the rebuttals I get quite often for men knitting is oh, well, it used to be a men's profession anyway. And so I was was it that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was a men's profession.
It was just that
I've never heard that.
Allowed to fill in the census.
Wow.
Women weren't allowed to fill in the census because only the tax-paying lead of the household, so the men, were allowed to have their names on the census. Wow. So we're going through the list of people that were in the guild going, oh, it's Mr. So-and-so. It wasn't. It was Mrs. So-and-so under his name.
Yeah.
Well, it's so
and
interesting.
That always infuriates me.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I find it interesting that you say that knitting used to be a male hobby, because I would, I feel like I could argue that, hobbies are genderless, but knitting if I really wanted to have a fight with somebody, I could say is predominantly feminine.
Well, but what you're saying that was that the women really were doing the work. It was just the men's name was on it.
Okay. I missed that part. I was like, wait a minute. What's up about this?
There was such a small pocket of male knitters that's where medieval knitting guilds came from. They kind of grouped together in their own little club over there. Mm-hmm. Even though women hadn't said they couldn't be involved. They'd made that choice on their own, then use that to exclude women, but take credit for women's work. And so like you couldn't, if you were a woman, the only way you could get into a knitting guild is if you inherited your husband's place through his death or going missing or whatever happens to the menfolk when they disappear. Like, that's the only way you could get in the knitting guild in your own right.
There's a small percentage of women, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. That is infuriating.
Because once again, women were doing it elsewhere, not making a big fuss about it. But the minute that a man does it, suddenly it's a exciting thing to talk about, which is why the book is framed around the lens of Tom Daley, because he's not a particularly skilled knitter. He just happened to be doing it in a conventionally attractive early 30s male body in public.
Wow.
And I was like,
wow. Yeah,
like, hold on, why are we celebrating that?
No, that's a great way to
hundreds of years of women achieving things.
What a
So the publisher was fun, where I had to be like, I want to have a 70,000 word rant about Tom Daley with some knitting in there.
I'd love to rant in a book.
I'm curious, so like, have you written a book before, or is this your first time?
No, this is the first one.
And so you just went to a publisher and just had an idea and just kind of pitched it, and they were, or how does somebody get started when you've never read?
One of my friends writes books on musicians and also Terry Pratchett. Like a general call out of, my publisher's looking for nerdy things, deep dives. And I was a little bit on the warpath on that day, apparently, and just straight off sent like a full chapter list over.
Wow.
For the history of knitting and like contemporary gender and like, knitting as artwork and why we do it. It's just a craft, but when the men do it, it's suddenly craftsmanship and art and important. And they hear back from them for about a week, and I spent the whole week just being like, oh no, have I just ruined not only my own idea but also my friendship with this person? Oh no. Proper stressed out about it. And then they emailed me back and were like, our lead publisher actually really loves that as an idea. Off you pop, you've got 18 months.
Wow, that's so cool.
Wonderful.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
It seems like you're really good about being confident in who you are and putting yourself out there. And it seems to really be key to your success. And kudos to you, because I feel like that's something I wish I had more confidence in myself. So you're inspirational for someone like me.
Same.
Thank you. Yeah. I draw a lot of my confidence, though, from the shoulders of the giants that I stand on, knowing all this women's history and knowing all this history of what I believe specifically. It feels like I'm letting the side down a little bit if I don't dedicate a little bit of time every week.
Interesting.
It feels for hundreds of years of women if I don't share these stories with other women, but also the wider population.
Right.
Yeah. Like, they did all of that for me to be able to sit here. And the least I can do is spend 10 minutes doing a little bit on some socks every now and again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have never even looked at hobbies that way, but that is like a really cool way to look at another way to look at hobbies is that connection with the past. So
absolutely. Like I said, it's very inspiring for me. I feel like I definitely am keeping that in mind going forward. It's like, it's part of history. I need to go. I need to go work on some wax seals.
Yeah, exactly. Everything I do is intrinsically important because I am part of history and I am doing it. Leave me alone.
Yes.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Love that.
We'll let you,
I know, I'm talking your ear off.
Oh, you're good.
I'm totally going to use all of this post
You
stuff
should.
in the podcast.
I'm just
episode, by the
interested
way.
in, yeah, you're a very interesting person. Like you have a lot of interesting outlook on things. So
That's all right. You can have me back if you want.
Okay.
Yes, as soon as you publish that book,
Yes.
we want to talk about it.
That's
Tell us
right.
all about
Brilliant.
it.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a great weekend and we'll let you go for now.
Brilliant. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to The Art of Hobbiness. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And for more Erin and Tam fun, be sure to follow us on all socials for behind the scenes footage on our journey to find hobbiness.